This is the C++ program that corresponds to the GUI output of the name, address, and the phone number. It appends these values to the end of the address text file. Now, we have these three headers we're going to be using. First one's IOStream, which is for the STD namespace. The second one is a vector, and that's a vector class. And the last one is FStream, which stands for File Stream Class. Now down here, we are creating a vector. This is a string vector, and we're calling it str list. And we're creating a string, str. Now, getLine retrieves the values from staying in. CIN stands for console in, and it puts those values inside of str, the string. Here, we're opening a file for read only. O for read. Address text is the name of the file, and we want to append to the end of the file. So it's std : ios _base : append, APP, stands for append. Now this is how we take the value that is in the string and put it in the file. So this is the string value. This is a pipe, a file pipe in this case, and that's the file designation. Next, we close the file. And that's pretty much all there is to this program. If you remember, there is two parts to the GUI. There's the part that sends the name, address, and the phone number. But there's also a part that searches the address text file to find matches. Because these two things are so closely related, and I don't want to keep opening and closing the projects, I'm going to put both projects in the same workspace. The way you do this is you go File, Open. You find the project file, in this case search.cbp, which is the project file. CBP stands for Code Block Project, and you open it. Now, as you can see, they're both in here. But there's a but. But only the one that is highlighted is actually compiled. So to compile it, we need to highlight by double-clicking it. As you can see, there's a warning here. Now we're going to double-click on the C address. And we're going to compile it. Now you notice here that this one does not have any errors nor warnings. So why is there a warning over here? Well, let's find out. There's a warning, and what it says is the comparison of an integer expression is different than the signless, which what it's trying to say here is that x is an integer. An integer is a value between 32,000 something to 0, or from 0 to 32,000 something. If you put unassigned in front of here and a space, then it would be a value that goes from minus 16,000 something to plus 16,000 something. But over here, size is defined inside of the class, the vector class, and it can be huge. Because we can't compare an integer to the size, because we don't know what size is, then we just go with an integer. And as long as you stay under 32,000 elements inside of this vector, you'll be fine. There's something else that I wanted to point out about this vector and all vectors. When your program starts, a memory space called the stack is created by the compiler. And in this case, it's 8 meg. And all of these types, integers and various other types, are all put onto that stack, as well as the definition of this vector and a pointer to the memory space. The second type of memory is called the heap. And the heap is owned by the system and is all of the memory that isn't being used by somebody else. Now, the definition and a pointer is on the stack, and that's for speed's sake. But the elements of this vector are actually on the heap, and that's because they can be quite large. That's the reason why that size can't be defined on the stack. Now, since this video is designed for amateurs, there's a few settings that I think you should be aware of. Click on Settings, Environment, and under Environment, go down to Autosave. Where's that? There it is. Autosave, and click all of these. And I put 10 minutes here and 20 there, so that this stuff will be saved for you. Go down to the help file, and this is where you add your help file. Just click on Add and show the charm file that corresponds. It's pretty self-explanatory. And one of them you will want to be your default, which you would put check mark there. The second one is the editor. In the editor, you can choose your font size. I don't see as well as I used to, so I have a bigger font size. Under default code, you can put it with your headers or with your source file. I chose source file. Put a / and an asterisk, and put in whatever you want, and a space, and then a asterisk and a /. And this will add it at the top of it. It's a comment. The next setting is under the compiler. And this one is the one that you really want to pay attention to. Now, here I have the 2017 standard checkmark. That's so I can have all the new goodies that came out in 2017. Down here, I have static lab GCC checkmark and static lab standard C++ checkmark and static linking. These should already be checkmarked, but if they're not, you want to checkmark those so that you don't have to send the DLLs for the standard libraries along with your program, because it'll compile them into it. Now, under link settings, you will see you'll need these. if you're in Windows. All of these, including that one. Now we go back here. After you put all those in, just like it was, you have search directory and the linker one. That you'll have to mess around with to figure out how to use that. In most cases, you won't even need it. But anyway, that's what's under that setting, compiler. Now the debugger, I'm not that familiar with. Global variables. This is where you put libraries that you want to use. In my case, for example, there's CV, which is a graphics library. And you put in the base of where it is, the includes, you know, where the header files are, the labs, where the .a files are, and the bin, that's where the DLLs are. You might want to consider that. Now double click on search, and then the search C++ will go to the top. And this is the one that searches the address text file to find any matches, and then returns those matches to your GUI. We have IO string, vector, and F string. Now here's something a little different. We're using std : COUT. And the same thing for end line, and the same thing for strings. Now, if we do this, we don't have to keep writing in std : Here's an example. String name. Didn't have that, we'd have to put std : string name. Now, this is a strut. A strut is a way of organizing data. Normally, in a strut, you wouldn't put any functions, just the data. This one is called enlist, and it has the name, address, and the phone number. Now, down here, we're creating a vector. And the vector is based on that strut that I just showed you. This is the definition of the strut. And we're calling it str list. And we're doing a second one, and that's str list 2. Now here, what we're doing is we're taking the definition of the strut, and we're creating two objects, which is a definition with memory, slist and enlist. Now here we're putting, looks like 4 strings. I didn't have to put in the std : I just automatically did. String, string 1, end, and line. Now here we have an integer that's the number of the lines, and we're starting off with 0. We're doing that so that we can count the number of lines that's inside the file. Now, std : f string, f string, and then the file name. Actually, it's not a file name. It's a pointer to the file. It says that this is read-only, so I read-only. Now, down here, we're using getLine to take what's coming in from the pipe and putting it inside of the end string. Now here we're taking what's inside the end string, which we just gathered, and putting it in str1. That's how you copy across string to a string. Here we're opening that address text file in read-only. Down here, we're saying while get line, my file, which is the pointer to the file name, and the line that we have put whatever's in the line to the delimiter, which is what this is called. Because if you remember, we had a string. This is in Lazarus. We had a string, and then we had a /r, or #13, which is the same as /r, and the address and a /r, and then we had the last one, which had a carriage return, which is #13, and #10, which is this one, which means next line. So what it's doing is it's counting the number of lines. It's just looping until it loops through the file and counting the lines one by one. Now, we need to use fseek to move the pointer to the top of the file, because you remember right here, we've moved the pointer to the bottom of the file because we kept reading the lines. We need to move it back to the top. And fseek, for whatever reason, doesn't work after you've used get line to get the number of lines. Here's an explanation of why. It's because it reads past the end of the file by 1 byte. So, and that causes an error. So you need to clear that error before you use fseek. And this is how we do that. That's a pointer to the file, and then you put clear. And then fseek will work. This says 0 bytes from wherever we're doing this part. std : ios _base : beginning. BEG stands for beginning. So this means we want 0 bytes from the beginning. Now that we know what the number of lines is, we can use that to cycle through the file. And so it says for integer x = 0. If you define an integer inside of a function, in this case the for function, that is only used to the end of that function. It'll be out of scope once you go past the end of this function. Now x equals the number of lines, which means less. X is less than the number of lines, then we just keep looping x ++. Now down here, we have, we're getting the line, but this time from the string, but this time we're only going to the /r, #13 in Lazarus. So we're reading that, and then we're putting that inside of this strut that we created. And then we get the next line to the R, and we're putting that inside of the address part of the strut. Now we're getting the line to the /n, which you remember was the last entry, which is the phone number. And then we're putting that string inside of the strut. That's the phone number. Now here's how you put the whole strut into a vector. So we're taking the str vector, it's dot, push back, and inside the parentheses we're putting in what value we want to put inside the strut, inside the vector. And that would be the values in the strut. Now, it says if we're at the end of the file, then break. That's in case we made some kind of mistake when we figured out how many lines there was. Now next after that, we have for integer x, x equals number of lines plus plus, so we're just doing like we did before. Then we're saying if the string list x dot name is equal to the same thing as what we are searching for that we sent, remember, through the pipe, then we want to copy into the second vector in the name part the name. And I'll explain this a little bit more later. But anyway, and then the address and then the phone number, and we're pushing that back in there. So unless what they sent us as the name isn't the same, then it won't copy it into the vector. Now down here, we're opening a file for write. So O F stream is write. And it says for integer x equals 0, x is to the size of the vectors, the elements of the vector. Now you need to remember something here. The elements of the vectors are a strut. So it's counting by the strut, not by the line. And so we're putting, this is piping into a file that we just opened. We're putting the name, the address, and the phone number into this file. And then we're closing both of those files. And that's how this works. But if you look at the file itself, which I believe I have right down here, there it is. Here's what our file looks like, the address file, the one that we created with the C address C++. That we got the values from the first element, the first part of the GUI. It's got Mary Jones and her address and her phone number. Then it has Bob Jones, the address and phone number. Then a whole slew of Marys, and then another Bob. But this is different Bob Jones because it has different address and different phone number. So that's what we're going to search for. That's why we created this way. And over here, when we were talking about copying the strut to the file, as you can see here, it's copying these 3 lines. So that's how that works. And when it's searching for the match, it's just reading this one line. So if we are searching for Bob Jones, then it will see this one. And then it'll copy what's into the second vector, everything from here to here. And then it'll go down here and it'll find this one too and do the very same thing. And that's overall how that works. I hope it makes sense. Now that we compiled our C++ programs, both C address and search, we need to copy the executables for the C programs over to the Lazarus directory. So highlight them, go copy, then in the address book, paste them. Then we go over here and we see whether or not it worked. So press F9 and put something in here. Add that. exit out of it, and let's go down here to the address. The address file, click on it, go all the way to the bottom, and you should see a new entry. And there it is. You're not going to have to save it or remove it like I did. And now you have something to search. So let's go back over here, press F9, and we forgot the search button. So exit out of that, click on Unit 1, press F12, move your clear button over, and then add a new button. That's in the Standards tab. Now this button we're going to call Search. Now if you go to the Event tab, while this button is highlighted, you will see On Click. This is just another way of doing this. And this is your search button process or procedure. Now in here, what we're going to do is add form 2 dot show. Now we have show, and we also have show module. We're going to use show module. The difference between show and show module is that you can have as many forms as you want if you use show, and they can be closed in any order, and we don't want that. We want our search form to close, and then to be able to close the second form. We don't want them to be mixed up. So we use show module. It works like this. Now we click on show. See, now we can't exit out of this one because we have show module. We had show, we could. Now we're going to go Bob Jones. We search for that. And as you can see, it returned Bob Jones, 123 Jackson Street, and this telephone number. We click next. We can see we still have Bob Jones, but now it's 123 Hat Street, and it's this telephone number. Click it again. It just goes back to the first one. It's just looping. So that's how you create this address book using pipes. Need to remember that the purpose of this isn't so much to show you how to write an address book, because if I was going to do that, I would use a database. But it is to show you how to use pipes, how to communicate between different programs, and how to do things like show module and various other things that we might have experienced. I'm sorry that I'm pretty poor at this whole thing. I'm closing in on 70, and I just ain't as sharp as I used to be.